Oh,
Okay. No, right. Okay.
good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Pits of Motorcast. This is your host, Dave. I got a line special guest, Nostalgia Fuel Coupe owner, Ted Brine. How are you doing, Ted?
Very good, Dave. How are you this evening?
I'm good. So, Ted, you began interest in cars at 9 years old?
Pretty much so. Yeah. Looking at Hot Rod magazine and in when I was in school, and I remember my first experience was looking through there and seeing about the reading about the March meet and reading an advertisement that Art Christman had won it, and from then it just kind of I liked the magazines, and like a lot of kids started building model cars and things of that nature.
So, what was the first car you owned when you were young?
Well, I had when I was 16, actually it goes back when my sister was 16, a few years before she was allowed to pick a family car because we needed a family car. And she selected with some help from my parents, but an
Right.
Oldsmobile convertible. Nice car for back then. So a few years later, when I was 16, it was time for another car, and so it was my turn. So my dad and I started exploring all the options and looked at everything in the world. He wouldn't let me get a Hemi Plymouth Satellite, or us, and so we wound up getting a Pontiac GTO, 66 GTO, with pretty much had everything on it. 389, 360 horsepower, tri-power car, rally wheels, 4-speed, everything you could think of for that time. And then, as luck or unfortunate had it, my grandfather passed away, and we inherited a Ford Falcon. So I wasn't even quite 16, a month or 6 weeks away from it, and had a brand new GTO that I could drive back and forth to football practice and wrestling practice and various things at school. So I had a neat GTO to learn how to drive on, which I did, and got to play around with it for a few years through high school, and learned how to had a lot of street encounters with it, and so that was a good old time. Literally had probably hundreds of street races back then, which we don't broadcast that we did that, but that's just was a fact of life.
So now your first real view of hot rods was at a Pittsburgh World of Wheels show?
Yeah, we used to take the streetcar downtown, and I can remember I went into my guy across the street and I were friends, and he was a year older, but our parents, back then you could just do that. We went down and got a streetcar, and parents gave us the money, and there was a World of Wheels, and I was really kind of floored by the custom cars with there. I wasn't into drag racing quite so much as I was just cars in general, but the one that really stuck out was the Little Deuce Coupe from the Beach Boys album. A guy named Chili Catello or something like that owned it, and it was just at the time spectacular. The blue on it and the pearl white, and had a multi-carburetor Oldsmobile engine on it. And, yeah, it was pretty. To me, it was pretty impressive at that time. I think the car's still around too. So that was that just kind of further fostered my interest in cars.
So now I read later on you built a go-kart from your dad's lawnmower?
Yeah, we would had an old Toro real lawnmower, and I used to we put a plywood and 2x4 rope steered go-kart together, scrounged up all the parts we could from everybody in the neighborhood, and hooked up my dad's lawnmower engine to it, and actually drove it around the driveway and stuff, and then we had to put the motor back in the lawnmower before my dad got home. But yeah, it's the embryonic periods of learning how to be a mechanic, I guess.
Now, was your dad into racing when you were growing up?
Not really. No, he was a casual fan of big races, the Indy 500 and Daytona and things like that. But really not. He's much more into sports, and that's really what I was doing at the time. A lot of football and baseball and other sports, and that was my parallel interest. We'll put it that way at the time. But the car thing was just kind kind of building, and I built a lot of model airplanes and model cars, and played around, tinker with the go kart and things of that nature until I got a little bit older and got my driver's license we just talked about. Then I started getting a little more serious with the GTO and beyond that. Went out to the drag strip a few times and watched guys like Don Garlitz and people come into the old Pittsburgh National Dragway. First car that I saw go down the track, as I recall, I drove in there and pulled down way down the end. They used to get massive crowds at Pittsburgh National Dragway back then. A lot of the tracks did, and it's probably in 1966. And I pulled in past the finish line was the only where you could park because it was all quarter mile of cars, 5 or 8 rows deep. And first guy came through the lights was a guy who got to be a good friend of mine. Later on in life, Mike Koski. And Mike's won a number of top alcohol dragster titles and everything. But that's first car. So I got on the drag strip. And then went to some other events, and the guys that made a neat impression was first really fast car that I can remember is Al Joniak, and that car, which was a 65 Mustang over wheelbase or something with a fuel injected 427 single overhead cam engine in it. That was really made an impression on me as well.
So now when you were in college part time, you started working at a service station and learned how to do mechanic work.
Yeah, pretty much. I had a football scholarship at the University of Miami, Florida, but I tore my knee up in my senior year and had 3 surgeries on it to sort that all out. So I kind of had to do something else. So my other interest, I said, was cars because I couldn't be playing football any longer at that time, and got a job like a lot of kids did, working at a gas station, and they would give me little chores, changing tires and various things like that, windshield wipers, batteries, whatever. And the more they gave me, the more I would take on. So pretty soon I was taking brakes off of cars. They'd put them back together, and then I would put the brakes back on and doing tune-ups and things of that nature. And the guy who owned the gas station suggested that I get a state inspection license for the state of Pennsylvania. So I went and did that, and it was a good. He kind of let me work whatever hours I wanted in between going to school. So it worked out pretty well, and I was able to gather up more mechanical skills and collect tools and things that I needed, and to progress as far as learning how to take things apart and, more importantly, put them back together.
Now tell us a little bit about when you were 19 years old and you ordered the Roadrunner.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I accumulated some money from my job and everything, and thought it would be time to, I had that GTO, but that was my dad's car, basically, and I wanted to do something a little bit better, and I started looking at all the options on cars, and basically the fastest car you could buy at the time was a Hemi Plymouth, and the Roadrunner was the chassis that was the lightest that I could put it in. So I ordered a 69 426 Hemi Roadrunner with 0 options on it. It actually had 2 options. I think the AM radio might have been an option, and 2 black hood stripes. But other than that, it had bottle cap, hubcaps, 4-speed that was standard. The Dana with 354 rear end in it, and I didn't want to put 410 or 411, whatever they had in it, because I had to get power disc brakes with that. That would just add more weight and drag to the car. So I wanted it as light as could be. So bench seat, B5 blue, which was a quintessential color. So I think I ordered that car in November, and it didn't come into the dealership until March. And I do recall that my dad took me down there, like most dads. He's trying to be a fatherly figure, and he asked the salesman what the warranty was on the car, and the guy kind of looked at me and looked back at my dad and said, it's 5 years, and there's 5 and 50, which was a Chrysler thing. And then kind of looked at me and said under his breath, of course, he said, that's 5 feet or 50 seconds, whichever came first, because the Hemis didn't have any warranties with them. So that was the first car that I bought, and went out and did the normal stuff the kids did back then with day 2 cars, and headers and gears and cam changes and things of that nature. And went to all the local drive-ins and street raced the car, and had a pretty good time with it back then. And there was a lot of heavy artillery on the street back then. 427 Corvettes and 396, 375 horsepower Corvettes and Camaros. I'm sorry, Chevelles and the 442s and those kind of vehicles that really weren't a match, but they were always out there. So every night was in the spring and summer was an adventure. That you'd encounter somebody, and we used to run out on Interstate 79 north of Pittsburgh, and there'd be 100 cars in there at 12 o'clock, at midnight, and 1 o'clock, and the tractor trailers would line the side of the road, and they'd blow their horns when the state police were sighted. They picked them up on a CB radio. So, a lot of fun. Nobody ever, no one got hurt. There were nobody was hostile or anything. It was just a bunch of kids with a love of cars having a good time. They thought anyway. And when we didn't do dumb stuff, we didn't smoke the tires in public or at the local food drive-ins or anything like that. And the people that did were pretty much looked down upon in the police itself because we didn't want to draw any attention to ourselves. But another good formative period, put it that way.
So Ted, what's the deal with the matchup with the Yenko Super Camaro?
Yeah. Well, a guy that I knew had bought a Yenko Super Camaro, 427 Camaro, and Yenko was a high-performance Chevrolet dealer located in Canonsburg, PA, just not far from where I lived. And that Yenko was just not any Yenko. It was the cover car for Superstock and Drag Illustrated, which was a pretty well-known publication back then, and they had done a road test on it with a gentleman by the name of Ed Hedrick, who drove for Bill Jenkins. He was a team driver for Jenkins, and Ed Hedrick drove the car in a road test that they did, and Jenkins breathed on this gold with white stripe, side stripe Yenko Camaro, and he jetted a carburetor and recurved the distributor, put headers on it, traction bars, and a couple other things. But the car ran 1190s, which was pretty impressive in 1969. Well, the car was then purchased by a fellow that didn't live too far away from us, and we used to see all the time. So we had an encounter one night out on Interstate 79, and his car was so much faster. He literally could have started in second gear and beat my Roadrunner, because the Roadrunner was a 1260 car probably, and he had a car that was quicker. And my good buddy Mark Becker, who's still a longtime pal of mine since back then, kind of said, "Well, we can't have that." So we took the car home, and a few weeks later, we dissected the whole thing. And another friend of mine, who I bought speed parts from, Stu Sandhouse, who was a kind of a engine genius, mechanical or electrical engineer from Penn State, who had a little speed shop, and so he was our guardian angel. Well, we took the car totally apart and built it as a legal NHRA B-modified production class car, and they had a 430-inch Hemi in it. We cleaned the bore up on it and had aluminum heads that nobody had back then. They were off of Dave Kofffel's Flintstone Flyer, and put a magnesium cross ram on it. There were no tunnel rims back then. State-of-the-art kind of thing. Schaefer Revlock clutch and a slick-shifted 4-speed 488s or 513s in the back, and gutted the whole interior, put little lightweight bucket seats in it. The radio heater was all gone, and all the sound deadener, everything you can think of. And we even went to the extreme of replacing every non-structural bolt in the car that held fenders and things like that on, replace them with aluminum carriage bolts in the fenders, and I cut the brake drums down to pull weight out of them. I think I pulled 3 or 4 pounds of metal just out of the brake drums to get the car as light as possible. And we did. We had a 3,260-pound Roadrunner when we got done with it, which was pretty light. And we had to ballast the car up to make the weight break. And, ran the car and set track records at 3 tracks, at least Pittsburgh National, Keystone, and Quaker City in Ohio. And And as luck has it, I got to run the guy with that Yenko again. He put a tunnel ram on the car, which is it had just come out, and heresy to do that to that kind of a car these days, but that's just what you did back then, and I annihilated him. You know, we had a car that was running real close to the NHRA national record, ET record, and ran on the mile-an-hour record. We ran 134 with that car. So that was kind of nice revenge. And then on top of that, the other car in that Superstar Drag Illustrated magazine that they kind of were comparing to was Jenkins' Superstar D car, which is a 427 Coupe Camaro that was a national record holder, Superstar D. Well, I ran him in eliminations one evening in New Alexandria, PA, and I had to spot him and ran him down from behind, and nobody knew who we were because we were from the other side of the county, and people came up and asking questions and everything about the car that we gone by a national record holding Superstar D car, and so that was all a lot of fun, and just continued to fuel the competitive urges, I guess, for hot rods. And I enjoyed building the cars, and had a lot of good guidance from the Stu Sandhouse. He's still a good buddy of mine. And Stu actually he had won Bakersfield a few years ago with a nostalgic dragster, just towed out there just to prove a point that he could still do it at an advanced age, and he won a nostalgic dragster probably 10, 12 years ago out of Bakersfield.
So now the success of that Roadrunner encouraged you to build the A-Fuel dragster?
You're right. At the end of the year, Stu and I got to be good friends, and he'd go around the racetrack with me, and we race tracks and all, and we decided we'd like to build something lighter and faster and easier to work on. So I parted out that Roadrunner, which is hard to believe, sold off the engine transmission we were in, and sold it to a gentleman. The car, he'd been after the car pretty much all the later part of the summer and had wanted it, which is a whole other story on that car. But Stu and I decided we would build a fuel dragster. Found a chassis used Logie car that up in Detroit, and went up and bought it, and got another Hemi engine, and built it as a fuel dragster, fuel injected car, and a lot of help and parts and input from guys in the industry. The Ram Chargers up in Detroit we used a lot, and our own work and Stu's ability to build engines. We built a very competitive injected A-fuel dragster that we ran the next 4 years or so. I was in it for 2 years and then sold. I went back to college and sold my half off to my good buddy Mark Becker, and he continued to campaign it very successfully with Stu, and we're all still friends to this day. We won a lot of races with that car, and it was and again, it ran very close to the NHR national record, and 200 mile an hour car in a quarter mile. We also had the first Lenco underdrive 2-speed transmission, I think. One of the very first that Leonard Abbott built. They were overdrive before that, and we bought one of the early 2-speeds and had a Crower slider clutch in it. So the car was pretty advanced for its time in 1971.
Now, what about the blown fuel car that was in the same year, 71?
Well, not the one that we run now. No, what happened is I decided that we were traveling around a lot with the car, and I was somewhere in a parking lot and changing bearings, and I thought, geez, it was hot in July or August. I thought, am I going to be doing this when I'm 30 years old? And I was 21 or 22 at the time, and decided, well, I'd best go back to college and finish my degree, which I did. That entailed selling my half of the car to my buddy Mark Becker, and I went back to college. But then I knew the folks at Pittsburgh National Drag Race real well, and I wound up being the announcer out there at PID for a couple of years, and writing their articles for National Dragsters. I wrote lots and lots of articles for the NHRA publication out of for Pittsburgh International Dragway. And then, as life has it, I wound up getting married and having a family, and started a career. I worked for U.S. Steel out of Philadelphia, and built a career in management there. And probably, I don't know, 6-8 years later, I built a couple superstock cars just for something fun to do. I had little children at the time, but I had some. They didn't require. They weren't into their own activities yet, and so I thought I'd do a couple of things. So I did a '64 Hemi Savoy, a factory race car, aluminum car, and then I did a '68 Hemi Barracuda. And they were all fun, but they were full-body cars, and that's where the idea for building our nostalgia coupe came about in 1980. I decided I didn't like full-body cars, so I bought a Roadster chassis, a real nice 115-inch T-bucket car, no engine or anything in it, and took it back to Philly, where I lived at the time, and had made acquaintance with a year or two before that a guy by the name of Eddie Quay, who's a chassis builder from Pottstown, Pennsylvania. And Eddie built Jenkins' early pro stock cars. Worked for S&W Chassis, Walt Lenny, and stuff earlier on. He had his own facility then. But, it was a good influence, and he kind of, I remember talking to him and saying, what do you want to do a Roadster for? Everybody has these things. He said, people like cars with doors on it, and I didn't want it. I didn't like working underneath cars that much, but we talked a little more about it. So, we'd make a car that was pretty dissectable, we'll say, that would be very easy to work on. And a little bit before that, I'd met another fellow who's been a good long friend of mine now for 30 years, Paul Goldie, and he had a speed shop not too far from where I lived. I met him when I was doing these super stock cars, but Paul had an engine in there. It was a 392 Hemi out of the old K&G fuel dragster from Havertown, PA. And we decided we would put that into whatever I built. Well, Quay talked me out of the Roadster, and he actually sold that for me. And we talked about what we were going to build, and we went through options, Willys, and 32 Fords, and things like that, and settled on a 33, 34 Ford. And that's what we started to build. But I had to find a body for it, and I didn't want a steel body, because I knew if you hit something with them, it'd be like razor blades. We'd have a blown fuel motor in this thing, and we're going to build it like a early fuel coupe that were the predecessors of fuel holders and funny cars, actually. So with dumb luck, I found a guy in Michigan, Jim Downs, who was making 3-window coupes out of fiberglass. But Jim said, "I'll make you one. I've been thinking about doing a 5-window, so I'll make you one," which he did. And he actually found me some old 34 rails too, and he made the body to 34 rails and brought it down to my home in outside of Philadelphia. And then Eddie Quay worked with me to build the 134 car that we have now, and worked out well. I didn't like cars with names, so the 134 were part of my NHRA Division 1 fuel dragster numbers. That's what the numbers are on the car. And it was a 392 Chrysler, and we took it out to Maple Grove first time out, and people couldn't understand what it was. It was a dinosaur for the time, but we made the first pass with it, and it smoked the tires from past the 8th mile, and came back, and I remember one guy came over and said, "Now I don't know why you built that thing. That is so neat." That started a whole series of tracks. Like Mike Lewis from Maple Grove asked us to come out and perform there a couple of times, which we did. And we did good guy stuff for Gary Metters all over the East, from basically Englishtown out to Indy and around the area, Salem, Ohio, or not Salem, Ohio, but Columbus, Ohio, at National Trail, and Keystone Raceway in New Alexandria, and got to run the car quite a lot, and it was pretty well known. And that was, from 80 to 89, we'll say, and then I had a blower explosion in Milan, Michigan. Just kind of a mistake. It was a magneto switch short in and out, and launched the blower, and the time my kids were getting a little bit older and they were getting in their own events. And I thought, geez, if I get hurt in this car, my insurance won't ever cover me. And at the time then, I left U.S. Steel and got moved to Pittsburgh for Alcoa, who I retired from not too long ago. And I sold the car off, and that was pretty much it. You know, built other cars after that. I did some Cobra replicas and a Corvette Grand Sport replica and some other things. I was still interested in it, but my kids were into sports, and that was the real focus. And I was going around with them to all their activities. So that was chapter one, I guess, with a 134 car.
And in 2013, you purchased her back, huh?
Well, yeah, I never even thought about it. But when I sold the car, I sold it to a gentleman, Frank Spittle. Frank was from North Carolina, and he was put on car shows like muscle car shows and things like that. And he bought it with his intent was just start it up. They didn't call it capitals or anything, but just start the car for shows and things like that. And he pulled out of my driveway when he picked the car up. That's the last I saw or even thought of it. In '89, I guess it was. And in 2010, Frank somehow or other contacted me through the internet and asked me whatever happened to that old coupe. And Frank, dude, I don't even know, because when he pulled away with it, that was the last I heard of it. Didn't know anything else about it. I didn't do anything with racing or anything at that time other than build some of the street cars that I was playing with here and there. And Frank said, well, let's try and find it. And I said, fine. He said, I should never sold that car. It was the neatest car I ever had. So he started looking for it, and I really, frankly, didn't pay much attention to it. I'd check in every 3 or 4 months when I thought about it and see what was going on. And really wasn't much anything, but I think in 2013 or thereabouts, Frank, somebody had written that they had seen the car, put in do messages, and I said, can I text him or something? He doesn't take text messages. And I said, how do you get a hold of him? And he said, well, if he's here and he wants to talk to you,